Hello. Thank you so much for being here. I was so ready, nobody come because of time. So it warms my heart. My partner was like, oh, nobody will come because everyone's going home. So I'm really happy to see you guys here. We are about to get started. Just full disclaimer, the title is like the reason I say making your first game as adult doesn't mean this talk is very PG-13. There's nothing spicy. The way I say adult is just a way to as adults you have more obligation for time and schedule. So a kid can make a Roblox game and not worry about making monies and navigating. But as adult you have more worries and making game is harder because you don't have endless time. But all the talk is gonna be very PG. Nothing is gonna be spicy or anything. A quick question: how many people here are making their game right now? Whoa, that's so exciting. And another thing that makes me really happy is how diverse the panel is. I started 5 years ago. Game industry wasn't as diverse, and the reason I want to give this talk is because I want to. A lot of knowledge that is in game development, they don't really it's hush hush. There's not a lot of resource, but there's no reason to gatekeeping. So I will tell you everything I know. Why am I here? So this is the summary of my job. I've been 5+ years in game industry. I am a system combat and gameplay designer. I do a lot of accessibility and inclusivity advocacy. I'm also the founder of IGDA Neurodivergent in game dev. I am neurodivergent. If you are neurodivergent, you can definitely make it as a game developer. I have worked in AAA, indie, co-dev, AR, VR, mobile, and a lot of different space. But that's not why you should listen to me today. The reason I'm here is because I started making game when I was 25 and started as a solo developer making experimental game. And over the year, I have mentored and does biz dev assistant for a lot of aspiring game dev for their first game. I also am a game design consultant for game hobby game devs or people making their first game, as well as a lot of company that does mission-driven games, such as education game, health tech, and advocacy game. I am also a secret Redditor. I float in a lot of game dev subreddit, and one motivation for this talk is because I have seen a lot of misinformation going on the internet. Because it's the internet, you never know what's good or what's bad. So I feel it's worth to sharing my experience with the things I've done. These are the credits, the game I've worked on. If you have any feedback about the last Call of Duty, feel free to let me know. I do not control the narrative and a lot of the stuff people hate, but I will. Disclaimer. This is not a secret to the success, how to make a successful video game. I don't know anyone has that secret. If you do, please let me know. I would love to know, and because that will make us very rich. A lot of stuff we're going over for this talk are the stuff that you should think about in pre-production or in early stage of production that will save you a lot of headache down the line. That's the main reason for this talk, but everyone's journey are different. I don't know how many of you guys went to the Davey and Ryan game jam yesterday. They made that was a very different way of making game. Anyone can make game, and everyone's game dev journey are different and unique. So all these things are to help you, but these are not Bible, and do not take it as the absolute truth. And so one day, for some reason, instead of play video game, you said, I want to make a video game. Why? That's my first question. Ask everyone who want to make a video game, because I'm why? It's so much work. Why you can just play and have fun? These are a lot of some of the answers, making imagination come true, share the joy, start your own game studio. I think that's a lot of people's dream. Pursue and inform the audience for if you are making mission-driven game. That's a big thing. Having fun, because video game is all about fun. Creating a legacy. and fame and fortune. Full disclaimer, if you're asked for fame and fortune, this is not a good place to go. Very few game dev are rich and famous, so just like, I mean, it's a good thing to aspire, but like, I just want to be very clear, this is not where you get like famous and rich. Friends and family, you just want to make something for your friends and family or make something with your friends and family. Any reason is valid, but your reason will inform your decision. So your reason, like, it's worth to like pause and think about why am I doing this, because it will help you inform decision later about like what is important to you. What resource do you have? Energy, experience, knowledge, money, time, skills, passion, team members, equipment and space, resilience, player base. Like, we have a lot of resource, and like a lot of time, like your resource is not just like the financial monetary resource, but also like your passion, your driven, and the people who can help you. Those are also very important. And most people who start the first time don't have everything. It's fine. It's totally fine. You can make a game without anything, but you need to have passion and motivation to work. Like if you want to ship a game. But if you don't have those resources, it's fine. You may learn, you'll earn it one day, or you can ship a game without it. And now we're going to some of the things you should think about as a first-time game developer. Passion and experience. Now, the first thing you need to do when you make a game is what game are you making? What genre are you making? What subject are you making? I think most of people here, you want to make a game because you already know this answer. There is a game that really inspires you. You want to make, you play so many games and decide this is the game like I want to make because nobody else is making it, or because like you just want to like create this like a different experience that with your personality in it. Things I always ask people who are like making game is like, what game do you like to play? Because the biggest issue for a lot of like seasoned game developer is they stop playing video game, which is, you should always be playing video game if you want to be a game developer. I'm sorry, like if you're a game developer, playing video game is not a waste of time. I have heard a lot of students who are like, oh, I don't have time to play video game because I'm busy making video game. But the reality is, if you don't play video game, you do not understand your audience. You are making game based, like, the game you make cannot be in touch with like the audience you are trying to reach. And I have a personal philosophy that a video game product is not finished until it's being played by the audience. So it's important to understand who your audience are and also it's important to understand what other people are doing. So understand your competitor. So like you know like, okay, what people are playing, what people expect with this genre these days, and who are your competitors are. Why do you want to play those games? What hooks you? Well, a long-term relationship with the genre system makes you happy. Part of making game is you will have a deep dive into the genre, into the mechanics, into the system. If there is a game type of genre that if you play too much it makes you sad, maybe it's not a good idea to make a game in that genre, because it is gonna be like, you're gonna like look into the genre system in a very different angle once you become a game developer. What will keep you going in difficult time? Passion is a big, like, that's why I always tell people, make a game in the genre, in the system that you are passionate about, because making game is a lot of hard work and it takes a long time. And how much experience do you have with the engine, workflow, pipeline, software, design, and art? This is mostly to address one common thing you hear a lot is, I'm making my first game, I want to make World of Warcraft. It's a very ambitious goal. It's unfortunately very fast. Most people realize they will not be successful because World of Warcraft is very expensive, highly technical, require a large group of people to make it. So a lot of time you can think about, do you have a lot of 2D experience? Do you have a lot of like experience making 2D art? Or do you have experience in Unreal and Unity? for 3D, and like anything you can do to like gather your experience in like, because like you have art, you have design, you have like anything you have previous experience will save you a lot of time from having to learn from scratch. And also like your experience with the engine will inform you a lot of decisions and prevent a lot of mistake you may make. And what about your team? It's not just like, I assume a lot of you guys are not just making game on your own, so it's good to like understand the experience and skill of all your teammates. So like, you know, like maybe you don't have a lot of experience in Unreal, but your programmer does, and that's a good enough reason to like make a game in Unreal. Marketing. Full disclosure, you don't need to make money. Like, money doesn't have to be your goal of making a game, but if you do want to make money with your game, these are the things you should worry about. Who are your target audience? Be specific. A lot of people be like, my target audience are, Nintendo has this philosophy, target audience is everyone from 9 to 99. That works for Nintendo. That does not work for most people. So be very specific who our target audience are. I'm not just saying like demographic, although demographic can inform you, like the purchasing power. If your target audience skew young, they may not have a lot of disposable income. If your target, but like also like community, like people who are, if you want to make a strategy game, your target audience is people who like to play Civilization. And that would be a good answer to like understand who your community is. The more specific you are, the more likely you will be successful. Most games, if you make for one person, are pretty successful. Although commercial-wise, you don't make a lot of money if you make for one person. Any evidence you'll find to prove there's a market for this. This is to address the issue. One thing I've seen a lot is, this is not a discourage for anything, I just want to put a disclaimer, but like a lot of first-time game dev are making 2D platformer. And if you go on Steam, there's a lot of 2D platformer. And there are like, as a result, you are facing the fact that this is a very saturated market, and the people who buy 2D platformer are not that many. So like one thing I would recommend if anyone want to go into biz dev, and part is go to SteamDB and to look at like sales figures for different genre and sales figure for like different game, and like the revenue and like how many like different genre, what their revenue breakdown. And so the thing is, if you're making a 2D platformer, you need to think very hard about how is your game differentiate from other in the market. Like if you click into 2D platformer, there's like 5,000 game. What makes your game different? What makes people want to click on your game? That's something you need to think about if your genre are like very saturated. Otherwise, there's a lot of like, there are certain genre like visual novels or like simulator that are relatively easier because you have a lot of consumer who will spend a lot of money on it. So you may be like, you may need to worry, you don't have to worry as much about differentiate yourself from others. Although that's still a good thing to think about, because if you're doing indie, we are having the fact that there's like hundreds of games published every day on Steam, and you are dealing with a market that is like very competitive. And how much are people willing to pay for the experience you are providing? That's like another thing is, there are certain genres that are very popular, but the audience of that genre do not want to spend money buying a game that is not more than 80% off down discount. This is fine for the audience, but as a game maker, you have to understand if the only way to get people to buy your game is at a heavy discount, it's not gonna be very successful. Like one thing a lot of people will tell you is the long tail, but the question is, are you making enough money in the long tail? Are the long tail only happen because your game is constantly on like 95% off? So try to understand your audience and what makes your audience feel the value of your game, and how much, it helps you understand like how much people are willing to pay for your products. And always go high though. I like, one thing a lot of indie developer make mistake is they always price their game way too cheap. And there is this weird psychology people have is if a game priced way too cheap, a lot of players wouldn't buy it because they assume it's a shovelware. So this is not just like, oh, like don't price it too expensive, but also don't price it too cheap. If you have a 20-hour campaign, don't sell your game for $5. Because a lot of people will think, oh, that game is trash. Otherwise, why would it be so cheap? So like, understanding psychology of pricing is very hard, and like, also we are going to like international market. Like, if you want to release a game international market, you need to understand like the psychology of each country and like how their consumer behavior. What is missing in the market? How can your game provide a different experience? The perfect example that happens yesterday is the game Palworld that got super successful, and their whole game concept is Pokemon with gun. And it's successful because Pokemon is a PG, like very PG franchise, and then you bring like AK-47 in with Pokemon, and people will be like, oh my god, I never thought that's a thing you can do. So if you can look at like the market and look at like the pre-existing assumption about certain franchise and genre and try to break that and try to make something that's different, it can be a very good way to like boost your like popularity and help you with a lot of free market. Like the Palworld is a good example. I didn't heard about this game through like advertising or anything. I heard about this game because my friend was like, do you know there's a game about Pokemon with guns? And that's free marketing. You want free marketing. Free marketing, word of mouth are the best marketing you can ever expect. Although I wouldn't count like 100% on it, but like if you have a unique concept, you are more likely to get free marketing from just like, have you heard about this game? The concept is crazy. Another good example is couple months last year, there was a body cam game that is like going viral on Twitter and TikTok, and like that game was like it ended up selling very well just because like that one TikTok video of like gameplay was like so different from most first-person game you've seen, and people started sharing. So social media is very, very important for marketing these days, and if you can provide something unique concept about your game, it can help drive the social media engagement. Game design and UX. This is what I do my day job, and I'm very passionate about. These are some quick game design things I always ask my clients whenever I talk to them the first time. What are your game pillar? If you don't know what game pillar is, I highly recommend look up to it. But the basic thing is every game, like most commercial game, you have 3 game pillar, which are the 3 most important things that makes your game different and important. And later, when you make like game design decisions, you will like, does this decision match our game pillar? And if it doesn't, then the question is the game pillar still valid? If it is, we need to alter our design to make sure. So the big issue about like a lot of like first-time game development is, oh, this game has a really cool mechanics. I want to borrow that. Oh, that game has a very cool mechanics. I want to borrow that. But then you have a game with a lot of mechanics that does not work well together, and it doesn't create a cohesive experience. As a result, the player just get really confused. So like it always works like, and this is if you work with a team, it's important to talk with your team member and to make sure you are all on the same page with the game pillar. If you have game pillar and your team member just like disagree, it's gonna create a lot of issue. And game pillar are things like, creating a player fantasy of a spy heist, or achieve like technology advancement in machine learning. Anything can be, but like those are the most important things in the game that you're trying to achieve, and those are things you try to evaluate like periodically during development. How far and how much is your progress and production work with the game pillar. And the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is different than game pillar in the way that game pillar is about like what makes your game work, and ultimate goal is more about creative vision. It's also always important because design is a very subjective, and there isn't a good, the right way to design. A lot of, if you ask a lot of game designer, you're like, oh, what is good design? And that's a question like game designer usually are scared to answer, because there isn't like objective good and bad design a lot of time, although there's like accessibility stuff that's like, I would just like don't do it. But like most design are like, they are good or bad based on your design goal and based on your creative vision. Certain like Dark Soul is a very good game, and Dark Soul combat is really good for the Dark Soul world. But if your game looks very cartoony, very pixelated, and looks very like kids friendly, and then your combat is very Dark Soul driven, that will create a diversion that makes like people who buy your game get thrown off. And another example is if your game is very hard and greedy, and like really dark and glory, but your gameplay mechanics is like super chill and has no difficulty, people may be a little bit, you know, like uncertain about like whether they play the game wrong. So that like we're going to like art styles and like game design later, but like one thing is like what's your creative vision? And that's gonna help you decide a lot of later stuff. What are your game loops? Game loops are the things you do from like, you know, begin like to finish a game loop. Almost all game, like if you have a game, you have game loops. Things like collect, trade, combat, and farm and collect. Like these are the things you do in the game, like the verb and the stuff you do to help player understand how to achieve their goal. So like game loops are like I'm seeing this as like a bracelet that connects all the important mechanics of your game to help player understand how to progress further. So game, like, it may sound boring, like, and you can change your game loop throughout the game. I would not recommend change it too much because part of like video game that different from a movie and stuff is people need to actively engage with your game to make the game works. And if you change too much, players get confused. They do not want to engage with your game, and they will never see the beautiful part of your game. And what verbs do you use to describe your gameplay experience? Verb is a common way you see in game design, which is like Mario, he jump. Call of Duty, you shoot. So like it's like those one words or like a few verbs that you need to do to understand the mechanics. And it's also a good way for people to like, for consumer, if they understand a verb, they understand whether this is a product for them. When, where, when, how do you plan to gather game design feedback for iteration? I do not believe paper design throughout. Like, I've seen this one game developer article that makes me really angry because there's this guy who's like, you know, I wrote this game design document. I just want to sell it to a game studio and have them make the game. This does not work. Paper design are important. The reason game designers keep getting hired is not because we have a really good idea on paper. It's the only way to achieve good game design is through iteration. You have to play test. You have to, someone else other than you need to play the game. And you need to understand whether certain things works or not, because in my experience, I have never achieved where like the design, the implementation work exactly as I imagined. That would be wonderful, but most time it doesn't happen. So iteration is how you achieve, like all the good game you like to play, they're good because iteration. They're not good because there's one genius game designer who just like have this idea and everything works. So that's the thing you need to think about before is where do you want to do playtest? Who are you gonna playtest with? When do you want to do this? It's very easy to like go heads down implementation and forgot that you need to like pause and like play the game and make sure it works as intended before you keep going. And how do you plan to do this? Are you planning doing in-person playtest? Back in the day, everyone is in-person playtest, and then COVID happened. And you can't do in-person playtest anymore. And then people realize there's things like Parsec, and there's like softwares, usertesting.com. There's ways you can do remote playtest. But it's like worth thinking about, like, you know, are you gonna do in-person playtest? Are you gonna do remote playtest? or like a combination of both. Like MAGFest is a really good way to actually playtest your game. If you demo your game, a lot of people are gonna come and they're all interested in like video game, and you can observe how they play, and you can like gather a lot of data from this way. Many game conferences can do this. If you have a local IGDA chapter, they usually host playtest night and talk with IGDA. You can do like those type of events. Otherwise, friends are good. Otherwise, like you can just go to like Discord or like even Craigslist to be like, I want a playtester. And if you pay them, like sometimes you buy them pizza, people will just come to play your game. But always have playtester. And people love to be playtester. Like even like the game is not their favorite, they will, because it feels good to like play something that haven't been released, and it feels good to like feel like your feedback is helping the people. What would be your biggest game design challenge? How do you define if you have found the fun? This is something like you're gonna most likely you're gonna realize it's different from what you imagined, but it's important to just like think about what would be a big challenge and how are you planning to achieve it. So this is like another way to phrase this is what do you need to achieve so the game would work? If certain things, like for example, if you have like a racing game and your car does not go forward smoothly, the racing game is not gonna work. Or if you have a rhythm game, but you cannot achieve like rhythm play, maybe don't make a rhythm game. So like the biggest challenge is like, it's like a lot of basic stuff is what makes your game fun, and that's gonna be your first priority because you need to make your game fun before you do any other stuff. This is the UX. UX is like, UX and game design are kind of similar but very different. Game designer, we are the baby. We are just like, we want to make everything fun. And the UX designer are the adult designer who's like, okay, we need to do these things so people can actually play the game. So who's our target audience and what do they care about? Sorry for the typo. What do they care about? Strategy players are very focused on, I made a strategy game and like they are very focused on like they need to have like books, like articles where they can like understand the detail and the meta before they play the game. That was something I didn't know when we released the game because we have like very good, like when we made Old World, we have really good in-game tooltip, so you never need to like read more than one paragraph to play the game. And we released it, we were really proud and we were like, we did a good job, and like this is the most accessible strategy game. And our player would be like, where's the strategy guide? And I'm like, why do you need the strategy guide? There's in-game tooltip. Turns out, a lot of strategy players do not want to touch the game until before reading the strategy guide first. So we have to actually retroactively hire a guide writer to like write a strategy guide for our game. So so we can like get the player to play our game. That's something I learned. And what does the UX flow of the game with your genre looks like? So these are the things like people who are fighting game, they expect certain like UX, they expect like being able to choose fighter, they expect like to get in and like certain like stuff, and like especially if you're making a game within certain franchise, people who play the previous game, they expect certain things to happen to find it. These days, most people expect to have accessibility option in your menu, and if you are like, especially if you are making a game that is like for very inclusive and for like a younger audience, they expect those options. And so like understand what the player expects to have. One good way to see this is there is a website called Game UI Database. It shows you the menu of many like hundreds of thousands of games. It's a good way to go to that website and look under the game within the genre you're trying to achieve and see what option other people are offering, and like think about whether like if it's something you can offer too. Especially if there's an option a lot of people are offering, player would want, like these days if you play open world game, most people expect to adjust sensitivity and if you have a dogfighting game, most people expect to have an inverse control. And if you don't have that, you will see a very high Steam refund rate because people will open the game, look at it, see they don't have it, and they just wouldn't even try. So it's a good idea to like understand what the like quality of life stuff. Yes.
I was actually going to say that's a big reason why I didn't play Last of Us 2 is because the game makes you kill dogs, and you can't not do that, and I don't want to kill dogs.
That's a very good example. He just said like he didn't play Last of Us 2 because that game forced you to kill dogs, and that's not something they want to do. So it's a very good example of like things that you are gonna miss in your like part of it. You're gonna losing part of our audience if you don't offer that option. Although Last of Us is also a very good example because there's a lot of decision Last of Us does knowing it's going to exclude a certain audience, but their goal is to create this, they have their own vision, they want to create this like very sad, very like tear-jerking story, and they force you to make hard decision. And they decide, knowing it's going to exclude audience, they still want to do this. And that's a conscious creative decision you as a game developer need to make. The thing try to avoid is make like unconsciously excluding your audience. But if that's your decision to make, and if you're Sony, you can afford to do that. What's the affordance of your game? Like this is kind of similar to the UX poll. It's like what do people need? Like, but it also goes into like what do people need to know to play your game? Do they need to like be very good at joystick? Do they need to understand like you know, Zachtronic is a very good example. Zachtronic games are very, very hard puzzle game that you literally need to have some engineer or like heavy like engagement for logic deduction, and they intentionally not give you a lot of like, you know, confettis and like encouragement for your gameplay. So that's a decision they make. They decide to have a very low affordance for the game, and that's the decision they make. But if you are making a game, you're like, oh, like Fall Guys is another good example. Is like that game need to have a high affordance because it's a multiplayer game. You need to have player, and you see later in the season, the game become harder and harder to win, and you see like only the hardcore players stay. A lot of casual players dropped out because they were not able to enjoy the game, like with the affordance the game try to like persuade it has. So what is the affordance of your game? And it's very important to like understand. And going back to that, if you want to have a low affordance of your game, that's a conscious decision you should make, and you should understand the consequence. Accessibility feature. How important are those to you? What accessibility feature are you planning to have? I ask how important are those to you because accessibility costs money and time. And one thing I've seen a lot in my development career is people will be like, yeah, we care about accessibility, put that on the Jira tickets, but put them in low priority. The reality is, I have never shipped a game where the Jira got emptied before we shipped. So if a feature is low priority, they will never be worked on. So it's one thing I find really, really helpful is in the beginning of the pre-production, have everyone in the room and have this conversation about what accessibility do you care and have a bulk estimate how much in time and money it costs, and then have a conversation. Yes?
What do you think are like the top like 5 or 6 accessibility features?
Depends on your game.
Like third-person adventure game.
Okay, a third-person adventure game, sensitivity, controller sensitivity is one big one. If you have text, large text font is a big one. Colorblind, yes. Yes, colorblind, inverse control. If you can have voice to speech and speech to voice, like even robot voice, like people who like with vision, like they don't care about if the voice sounds weird, but like they need to understand the story. And the question is, what is important? Do they need to understand the story? Do they need to overcome certain boss to see the later level? That maybe dynamic difficulty is something you should think about. Do they need to have button smash? Maybe having accessibility that they don't have the button smash for people with mobility issue, that was helpful. there are certain games you don't really need to hear anything. That maybe sound accessibility is not that important. So it's going back to like the verb and stuff is about like what is necessary for a player to do to enjoy your game. And those are the most important accessibility stuff.
I guess I mean just like, what are the most frequent ones that are turned on, like for like market share? Like this is the most common accessibility feature that is used the most, like across games. But
yeah, that's like colorblind mode is often like a lot of people are colorblind. Subtitle is a big one, and sensitivity motion blur is big one, and yeah. And if you have, Misato has a very good talk yesterday about like accessibility controller. So like think about like maybe like does your game can be playable with accessibility controller? What about inclusion? Inclusion and accessibility are different. Inclusion is what type of demographic are you trying to achieve? A lot of older games, they with the assumption that this is a game made by white men, played by white men. They do not have people of color that is in the game that is not a villain. The first Halo game, if you see, all the dark-skinned people are the enemy, and that is not good inclusion. Another thing about inclusion is if you decide to include a person with certain marginalized identity and you are not part of that demographic, I highly, highly recommend talk to a sensitivity reader and talk to someone within that demographic. There's this genre in AAA right now is like we need female protagonists because female protagonists are important. And then you have a lot of female protagonists that is like made by people who are not from that demographic, and they're basically men with boobs. It's not, and people know, like both male and female play, like any gender player, they were like, this is a man with boobs because they act and talk like a man, and they do not, like, you know, it's a lot of stuff about like if you decide to have certain character, like I don't want to like sounds like I'm not trying to be transphobic or anything, but like if you have a trans character, which is also valid, you need to talk to people within that demographic. I'm a combat designer. That's something I'm very passionate about. One thing about combat design is the way your body look and the way how you identify changes about how you fight. If there's a movie called Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, you see like, you know, the women and the men fight very different. You know, like Jackie Chan is a very different fighter than like, you know, someone who trained in the West. And so your identity really changes about like how you fight. And if you have a tail, that's another different thing. Your tail will change how your body balance and how you like twist your body. So understand the character and understand why do they engage conflicts is very important to make your game good. One of my friends who's a narrative designer, and she told me every time she joined a project, she will ask a question about why does the character choose violence? They have the choice to live a peaceful, boring life, but they choose to engage this exciting, violent lifestyle. Why? And that's a question to ask. It can be any answer, but you need to have an answer. Okay, let's go to the scope and production. What is the availability of the team, short term and long term? Like how there's people who be like, yeah, I'll throw like 60 hours every week in the game, but if your game production is 2 years, eventually they're gonna have a mental breakdown. So understand the availability of the term, understand like time zones, like when can you have synchronous meeting, when can you like work asynchronously is very important. Do not scope your game way bigger than the availability of the team because nobody want to work on a game for 15 years. Just from personal experience, there's nothing hurt more than knowing your game will never be shit in your lifetime. What are the skill set of the team? The reason I'm saying this is because if your team member cannot work right away, they need to learn tutorial, they need to like learn certain skill set, that's something you need to factor into your scope. If you decide to do like, you know, a third person open world adventure game that is very big, but your team member does not have those skill set, that's gonna be a bottleneck, and the question is, are they willing to learn? How much are they? Like, you can't really force someone to be a genius at a certain discipline. So you need to scope according to the human resource you have. Otherwise, you need, another thing to think about is it easy to hire talent with certain skill set you're looking for? Like, if you are making a game in like Unreal and Unity, it's easier to hire a programmer than if you're making a game in Godot. Doesn't mean Godot is a lesser engine. It's just there's less talent pool in Godot compared to Unreal Unity. Are you able to learn on the fly? I have worked with this does not apply for programmer, because I assume if you're a programmer you need to learn. I have this issue with narrative designer and artists who I have an artist who refused to learn how to do vector art, and that means we cannot have them to do our UI. And that was something I wish I had this conversation before I hired them, because we have this issue. It's like I was like, we need this vector art for the game, and they were like, but I don't want to learn. And it created a lot of difficult conversation, and we end up having to let them go, which was not great, because then we have to find a new UI artist. So it's good to ask, like, before you work with someone, be like, how much are you willing to learn this thing we need that you don't have? Because I don't want like encourage people to be like, don't hire anyone who already have the skill, already have the skill you need. Because part of game development is learning new things. And every game I work on, I have to learn some new technical stuff. But it's important to work with people who's willing to learn those stuff. And how much time do you have to work on the game? If you have a day job, which I think a lot of us do, how much time do you have? Like 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week? And like, do not just be like, oh, I don't need to sleep. Because like, this may work for game jam, do not work in long-term production, because you will need to sleep. And another thing I always say is, when one team member decide they don't need to sleep and get burned out, it's gonna impact other people. Like, because like that, especially if it's a lead who's very like agitated because they don't sleep enough and like very angry, it's gonna impact the morale of the whole team, and I don't think it's worth it. So it's good to like have realistic expectation about how much time you can put in the game. And you know, sometimes it's like, it means you need to take extra months to finish the game. Totally fine. What the MVP look like for your project? When's the deadline? MVP is minimum viable products, which is like the prototype or demo, is the thing you need to do to be like, okay, this game works, and this is like how the game is gonna look. So it's good to have a conversation about what does MVP look like, when is the deadline, like when do you need to like finish it. You can push the deadline, but it's always good to like, I would avoid the kind of ideas like we'll get it done when it's done, because more than likely you'll never get it done. So anything you can do, it's like to understand the deadline, it's fine. And what does the final game look like? That's another thing to talk about. Production. Most indie teams do not have a dedicated producer. Doesn't mean you can have no producer. Someone on the team need to make sure the project stay on track. Otherwise, it's gonna be very messy. Success gate, that's another, like, kind of goes back to MVP. MVP is the first success gate, but during the production, you have like different like alpha, beta, like release, and like different success gates, like even like not just for the whole project, for features like combat features, inventory features. What does it mean? Like how do you know if your inventory have enough feature to be success? This is very important if you ever decide to work with a publisher, because success gate is how publisher gonna pay you. And it's very important to like make sure you agree on things you can do and make sure you can get paid. How do you keep each member accountable and stay healthy? Like, going back to the early thing is, if you work a full-time job during the day, it's really hard to like make sure people do their work, because like, you know, like I'm working on like Himbo Hunter right now on the side, which is like everyone on the team have a AAA job, and there's times people will be like, oh, we have a crunch week, I cannot work on this project. It's fine, but you need to be actively communicate with your team member and make sure everyone on the same page about your availability. Stay healthy, please go to sleep, please eat, please take break. I do not believe, I don't think video games are important enough for you to destroy your house over. And the best way to be a good game developer is stay healthy so you can make more games. What happens when production hits a delay, and they will. Unfortunately, truth is production never goes as planned, and they're gonna have delay. And the thing I try to avoid is making that become a blame party, as people started pointing fingers and people get angry and get upset. It's fine. Production delay is very normal. It happens all the time. You are always gonna adjust your production during the game dev journey, and it's good to have a discussion early. It's what happens in a delay and how do we catch up to it, so it doesn't become a reason for the team to fall apart. Feature priority list. This goes back to accessibility. Early accessibility, I was talking about what is important, what is not important. This should be for all your feature. All your features should have a priority. What is the high priority? What is the MVP? Is what is the most important? Going back to the game pillar. If the things relate to your game pillar, there's high priority. If they're quality of life stuff, they're mid priority. Accessibility, a lot of times is medium quality. And then Easter egg is low priority. Easter egg are great. People love Easter egg. I've watched so many products where people the first day they have a long list of Easter egg. Your game doesn't need an Easter egg to ship. It's great to work out if you have time, but that should not be something prevent you from having regular production progress in your project. Scrum and Agile, this is just a quick note. Scrum and Agile development are very, very popular in software. A lot of people, big companies, every company is doing this. One thing I've noticed for smaller team is Scrum and Agile sometimes just you wasted a lot of time do production instead of working on the game. And sometimes it's worth it. If you don't have 5 people, do you really need Scrum and Agile and spend a week planning every month? Maybe not. Maybe you can just talk among yourself and get it sorted out. I work in AAA where there's 500 people, and yes, you need Scrum and Agile. If you have 5 people and you can just talk over about what you need to do, Scrum and Agile is very time consuming and it's very expensive. So I'm not saying don't do it, but maybe a lot of team these days, they just be oh, we are software domain, we need to have Scrum and Agile. And really? Do you really need it? And also Scrum and Agile can be very draining for a lot of creative people. So sometimes when you over production and over planning, people with creative brain, they just their brain just shut off. So definitely think about whether this is something you really want to do. Waterfall is fine for a small game, I think. Waterfall, which is you just do one thing at a time, versus the iteration for Scrum and Agile. Look into different development style and find the one that actually works for you. Engine and tool. What graphics do you want? 2D, 2.5D, low poly 3D, real 3D. I'm saying this because the more D you have, the more expensive it's gonna be. And then if you do realistic 3D, you also have to worry about processing power, optimization, because otherwise your game just Steam Deck is very good, Switch is really good, but those software don't handle real high poly 3D very well. So if you make a 2D game, it will save you a lot more time to worry about optimization. Talent acquisition, team experience, going back to the earlier is how many people, how publicly wide use. Unity is successful because everyone who go to game school were taught Unity because they spend a lot of time to work with university. And then those students come out and they go to company and be this is the engine we can use. So companies start using Unity because they don't have to train their talent. And then with the thing recently happened with Unity, if you know, you know. If you don't know, Google it. It's a story. A lot of companies, including our company, start to just emergency train people for Unreal. But like again, if you want to use a proprietary engine, you have a much longer training time because most like I work in custom engine, people don't become useful until 6 months later. And 6 months training is a lot of money. Do you want to work with a publisher that will take a percentage of our revenue? Do you want to work with a porting house that will take a percentage of revenue? Do you want to work with ToeDev that will take a percentage of your money? But on the other hand, it will save you a lot of time. Like most people making game are not that interested in digging into game certification, including me. Like game certification is very painful and long and very boring as someone who don't like those things detailed too much. So like it's worth it to just like work with your porting house so you can focus on developing games instead of having to worry about a lot of other logistic issues. Yes?
Would CodeDev fall under like the main company build the like single player and then CodeDev would build like the multiplayer off of the single player?
That is one of the CodeDev. I am currently working at CodeDev right now, so there's different type, like single player, multiplayer is one, and another is like DLC, having level. You have the main system, and you have a CodeDev to build actual level and content. Right now, I'm working on a project where they need designers. Like a lot of time in staff augmentation, they just need more designers. So like I'm a CodeDev, but I work with the client's company and to help them. Like they have this vision, they have this pillar, they know what they want to do, but they need a lot of people to build like small design system to make the game work. So CodeDev can go like many different ways. Some CodeDev do localization and or like help you like release your game in like other market. And sometimes, yeah.
Would like the relationship between like I want to say Nintendo and Bandai Namco be considered?
Yes. Yes, a big one for CodeDev is Sony and Bluepoint, where you do a lot of remaster. That is part of a CodeDev too. And another, I work for Pipework, which is a CodeDev company, but another one a lot of you guys may heard about called Iron Galaxy. And they do a lot of like PC port and like, Steam port, or like they help maintain live service. So there's a lot of CodeDev business in America right now. Like look into it if you're interested. Version control, you need version control. Please have version control. There's many different tools. I'm not an expert on this, but please have version control. Hardware need. You need hardware for development. Unfortunately, if you want to make video game, you need computer. If you want to port on console, you need dev kit. If you want if you need to use controller, all your designer and programmer and artists need to have a controller. So it's not just like your stuff. It's like if you decide to use certain stuff, everyone in the company need to have. And a lot of people in your team don't have controller. Are you gonna buy it to them? And that's something you need to think about, and that's money. If you are doing remote, telecom device is very important. Are you using Google Meet and Zoom, a lot of them, like the free version, are kind of getting worse now. So it might worth look into like investing like a paid version for one of those telecom device, telecom like service, so you can like actually have remote work and like have like a place to like with all the documents and record. You want to keep records for all the conversation you have. It will save you a lot of like he say, she say arguments in production. Who's gonna work in engine versus external tool and paper design? Generally, not everyone on the team are gonna touch the engine. And it's more like in a bigger company, usually programmer and technical designer are the one touch the engine. Regular system designer are the one touch the blueprints. Like we don't touch code. As a game designer, I don't touch code, I only touch script. And then there's like high level people that does paper design. If you're an artist, a lot of time you will never have to touch the engine. But because going back to the version control, it's good to like have a conversation who's gonna use the engine, because a lot of version control you cannot work on the same product at the same time. So understand like what type of role does need to work in engine, what type of role need to touch the code, and what type of role are just doing like paper and like external stuff. Platform, what do you want to do? PC is the easiest. everything else costs extra effort. Although, because it costs extra effort, if you can get it working, you expand your audience a lot more because your competitor on PC is way bigger than your competitor on Mac or Linux or Switch. There's people who only have Switch, and you have way less competition. And the same as Mac. Mac players don't have a lot of option. So if you can get your game to work on Mac, it means people will buy your game just because they want some game to play. So it's something to think about. Ecosystem, who can play. This is address the issue of Roblox, and I don't know if some of you guys must be old enough to remember Dream. These are in-game game engine that work in the ecosystem, and you can play. If you have a Roblox account, you can play Roblox. If you have Dream, you can play Dream game. But if you decide to make a game within this ecosystem, you are excluding a lot of audience who just don't want to create an additional account to get into the ecosystem to play your game. And one thing I learned when I do mobile is the more things you ask people to do before they can play your game, the more people will drop off. So you want to reduce the friction. You want people to be able to just play your game when they want to. So that's something to think about if you decide to put your game within the ecosystem. Not saying don't do it. A lot of time we do it because the company pays us to do it. But if the company is not paying you to do it, so think about if you can make your game available for people outside the ecosystem. Counselor certification is, like I said, it's a huge pain. It's very a lot of back and forth. You have to talk with the council party, and they have to go through their QA. It takes a long time. If you want to do it, schedule at least 3 months before your release to do it. Think about if it's worth it, and maybe hire a porting house to save you a lot of headache. Can your player play with keyboard, controller, touchscreen? Going back to accessibility, you want to have more options for player because not everyone knows how to use controller. Not everyone can play with keyboard. Not everyone can use touchscreen. So, what control do you want to have player? And the more control option you have, the more audience you will have. Age rating. This is way more work than a lot of people thought, and because every country has a different age rating, and they have different things they care about. Like in America, you can have violence, chop your head off, and that's PG-13. But if you lit a cigarette, you're dumb. In Japan, you can have a lot of nudity and erotic stuff. That's fine. But if you have certain element, it's not okay. So it's I spend a lot of time reading age rating of different country, and also every country gate at different age. Some places are 10, some are 13, some are 15, and it's a lot of work. You need to go through age rating if you want to release in consoles and a lot of places, but look into it. Just don't be I put this here so you will have something in mind while you make your game, because a lot of people get caught off guard when they a month before release the game and realize this happens to us in AAA game where they're full disclosure, there was a couple months before Call of Duty release, the Korean age rating was that thing doesn't okay, and then we have to scramble to fix it. So yeah, just make sure you understand how age rating works in different countries that you want to release your game. And where are your audience? There are certain type of game are very, very popular in China, so it's important to understand their policy. And there are certain type of game are much more important in Europe, deep strategy game are very, very popular in Europe. And understand where your audience at, and understand their consumer behavior and their local law and regulation are very important. And discovery, go back to marketing. How people gonna find out your game? There's 500 games really on Steam every day. How they're gonna find out your game? What's your plan to let people know your game exists? There is a lot of discovery thing you can do within the store market, but then those things getting this front page in store market are usually really hard, and store market they will not feature you until you already prove your game is popular. So look into like other ways like social medias and like marketings and like how do you gonna make people realize your game exists. And performance, going back to the earlier, is like certain console VR performance is a huge pain. Mobile performance is a huge pain. PC, not so much. Xbox Series X, you can probably do anything you want. So like, look into like performance and like if you want to go on certain platform, understand the limit and how much like allowance and do a lot of testing, do a lot of stress testing and like especially if you do like live service game or any game with online multiplayer, do a lot of stress testing. Art pipeline, art skill set, taste. We are almost out of time. We're already out of time, so I'm gonna rush it a little bit. But like, you want to make an art style that your team actually appreciate the taste. If everyone on your team thinks the game is ugly, you're gonna have a hard time going forward. Genre preference, going back to the earlier, if your game is very cartoony, people may not want like extremely hard, difficult game. And that's something you want to think about is what genre preference, and when people look at your art. I have worked with recently a client, they have this very cartoony, very cute game, and then they were like, in the design document, they're like, our game is not cute, people should not think that game is cute. Well, that's the trouble because all your character design and all your game are very cute. And so you cannot just hope people wouldn't think, like people when they see art, they're gonna expect, they have expectation. And you cannot just like hope that they wouldn't have the expectation. So like decide an art style that actually match with like the game you wanna make. And how is your game, like how is your art stand out? A lot of asset flip games, like if you just, your whole game is using Unity store assets, people gonna know that and they're not gonna click on it no matter how fun it is. So like going on Steam, like one thing I do is like I go Steam Discovery Queue and just see like different storefront and be like, how would my game stand out among all those other games? Render requirement speed. The more detailed, the more high power your game is, the longer it's gonna render, and render costs time. During my first game, we will just like finish the game and then render, and we'll go out to get like pizza, because it's not gonna finish in 3 hours. That eats out development time a lot. Mixed media used with intention. There's also like mixing style, like mixing font. When you have too much different like typeface, when you have too much different style, it's okay. It can be work, but you have to use with very detailed intention because art style and font typeface are ways to communicate with player about different system. So there are some of my favorite game has like variety different style and they're great, but there's also a lot of game where like it feels like people just throw different art together and it doesn't make any sense. The power of VFX and filter. There is a game called A Short Hike. I highly recommend look into like the GDC talk. This game is made by a programmer who has no art skill. The game was super pretty because all he does is he wrote a shader and he makes like all those storyboard assets looks like art and like super cohesive. So if you don't know how to do 3D modeling, if you don't know how to do art, it's fine. Like look into filter, look into VFX, and a lot of times those would just make your game looks really good without like a lot of art effort. You need an art director. Every client I work with, I'm like, what's your art direction? A lot of people do not have art direction, and that is really scary. I'm not saying you need to hire like an individual art director, but like someone in your team need to be in charge of art direction. How are you paying them? Revenue share? Are you gonna pay them by hours? Are you gonna pay them by salaries? People need to get paid one way or another. What is your marketing budget? How are you planning to market your game? It's my friend Michelle Lega has a GDC talk about marketing with zero budget. You don't need any budget to market your game. Any budget helps though. So any budget you have and like having a community manager is really, really helpful, but also it costs like, there's a cost behind it. So like that's something you should think about. And publisher, marketing partner, marketing partner is something you can think about if you don't want a publisher. It costs less, and but they can help you like go like do press release. And you want a marketing partner who has connection to like press, who has connection to like those high level accounts. You don't want a marketing partner. You don't want a marketing partner who start their job day one. Like the power of marketing partner is their human connection, it's their network connection. It's not like their marketing degree. International market, if I want to do localization, language is one thing. I do not recommend Google Translate. I'm bilingual. I have seen a lot of horrible translation. That's not gonna help. Like have someone who's native, who can speak the language. If you want to do Google Translate, at least have someone proofread it for you. Currency, like if you do everything US dollar, a lot of countries, they don't have that many income. Like your game can be their month salary. They're not gonna buy your game. So like maybe think like there's a lot of stuff in Steam and like a lot of research about like the average price for different country, and maybe do like a localized price for your game. And cultural adaptation, like going back to age rating, but also like there are certain things that people take for granted in America can be very, very confusing for people in Europe and Asia. How long is your runway? This is a very sad story, but like most people, they make game, they have a budget, and that's how much you are willing to. And the question is like, if you don't get a publisher, if you don't get any money, how long can you go before you realize this maybe cost too much? Because the game development costs money, and it's maybe think about like, you know, how long can you go with the money you have, and how much are you willing to invest on your own? Because I have worked for a company where the publisher pull out, and then we have to have this discussion: is how much money we have in the bank, and can we still finish the game? What if you're running out of money? That's a really realistic question a lot of people have to ask themselves. Because especially if you do this full time, people need to pay bill. If you're running out of money, a lot of people are not going to work on the game anymore. Common mistakes. These are people overestimate how popular the game is, how much people are willing to pay full price. A lot of people overestimate how unique their idea is. Unfortunately, I haven't met someone who gave me an idea and be like, there has nothing like that. The more you look at the game, the more you realize like idea is only half of the battle, execution is more important. Important realism versus fun, that's a common mistake for game designer is like, oh, this is what happens in real life, I want to copy it. But the reality is people play a game because they want to have fun, not because they want to relive the real life. Long-term commitment, a lot of people will say yes to like 3-5 years commitment, now realize they may have a kid, get married, and other life things happen. Overestimate the skill, it's like, you understand this. People just like you. A lot of people overestimate the player. It's common people be like, I want to make a game for a player like me. Then the question is, how many players are like you? Future success based on past success. This is an interesting one you see a lot in like veteran like AAA developer. Is like, I've shipped this game that's successful. If I do the same thing, I will be successful again. The reality is, video game market changed so much, and people's expectation changed so much. Gen Z's player behavior is very different than Gen X. So like understand, don't just think like someone is gonna be successful because they're successful before. Underestimate cost. A lot of people underestimate cost, a lot of people underestimate the time it takes. A lot of people underestimate the role of the art style. A lot of people underestimate the importance of marketing. Someone got a new game. Underestimate competitor is very common. You see a lot on subreddit where people argue and be like, no, my game is just better than other competitor, and like, but you need other people agree with your statement. You can't just like, you think that way, but nobody else agree with it. The impact of market change. COVID changes game market in the way nobody ever expected. A lot of things are beyond our control as game developer, but understand and underestimate the importance of accessibility. Accessibility is very important these days. A game, if you release in the 90s, like people don't expect a lot, but like these days, you have so many competitors. If your game is not accessible, people will just play a different game. The difficulty adapting new technology, that happens a lot. But every time there's a new generation of console, there's a lot of work trying to like work in the new console. Or like VR, like if you only make flat game and you decide to make VR, it's very different. Teamwork, teamwork, teamwork. A team that hates each other is not gonna go well. And production goes back to like, that's something, production is the boring thing nobody wanna think about, but if you don't think about production, you create a lot of issues down the line. And playtest, always playtest your game. The more people can playtest your game, the more you have a better idea of how game work, how does your game work with general audience. My hot take, you need a game designer. If you don't have that many manpower, consider hire someone who can do technical like implementation as well as game design. Game design is not the ideal person. Do not hire a game designer because they say they have a good idea. Game designer is not artistic director. Not every game designer can, like, I do have an art degree, so I help with a lot of projects, but like, most game designers do not have art training. So they should not be the artistic director if they do not have like the background in that. People wear multiple hats. If you are indie, you're gonna wear multiple hats. Some roles are easy to combine than others. Beware of the workload. Like if you can be a community manager and a designer, that's fine. But if you're a designer, artist, and a programmer, it's a lot of work. Just be aware. This is my favorite quote from my friend who's a producer. Game dev production is like herding kittens. You'll have a lot of disagreement, things will go wrong, a lot of conflicts. Find someone who can solve conflicts like adults. A big issue a lot of like team has is people whose ego way too big, and when you disagree with the way they do stuff, it becomes like you're hurting my ego and my like, my whole identity, and that is really, really hard to work with. But another issue is I have worked with team where nobody wants to say anything negative. And the game has gone in a wrong direction, like very far. But everyone on the team knows something is wrong, but nobody wants to say anything. That is not great either, because you want to ship the game, and that's important. So find team member who can solve conflict like adult. When do you want to tell the world? The earlier you tell the world, the more attention you get, the more marketing you get, but also you get more armchair to game dev. You get more people on the internet telling you how to develop your game. That's why a lot of like big game companies do not announce their game until they're almost releasing, because it can be a slippery slope. But like if you're indie, you may want to consider let the world know earlier, because then you have time for word of mouth to like go around. The best way to make game is to make more game, but making more game doesn't always make you a better game dev. I put this in because I recently met a lot of like college graduates who's being like 300, 500 game jam, and if you make the same mistake every game you make, it's not gonna get better. But nobody, like everyone's first game sucks. A lot of people like need to you need more time and practice to get better. Play your game and have fun. Please play your game. The biggest mistake of game development is they don't play their game. I do not understand why. And also have fun. This is a fun business. This is an entertainment business. We're not trying to save the world. Nobody's gonna die if we don't ship our game. So have fun. And that's it.